It takes place in the year 2074, when global warming has devastated the planet and the government has collapsed. Multinational corporations have now taken control and dominate 90% of the world. These corporations engage in covert warfare to gain market share and control of the planet's natural resources. Employees of these companies live in safe areas known as green zones, whereas the poor struggle to survive in dangerous, crime-ridden red zones. In the next scene, we meet our protagonist, Ben, who lives a luxurious life in the green zone. He is married to a woman named Laura, who is a plastic surgeon. Ben works for one of the largest companies named Spiga, which is run by Laura's mother, Elizabeth. We then see the couple having breakfast in the morning with real bacon, which is very rare and expensive in this world. They suddenly come across the news that terrorists have bombed the Spiga branch in Jakarta, causing dozens of deaths. Following this, Ben heads to work where all employees and their suitcases are scanned before they are allowed in. Later, we see him and his boss, Chad, working on a new invention called Everclear. It turns out this software can record and reveal a person's thoughts and dreams. Surely, the results will be nothing short of horrific. They present it to a man named Julian, who's the head of security. However, there are still some flaws in the software, so Julian urges them to work on it further. Later, in his office, Ben pulls out an old photo of a woman named Elena and uses facial recognition to locate her. He learns that she is currently being forced to work as a prostitute in a place called Arcadia. It turns out that Arcadia is an exclusive club run by Spiga where only the top executives are allowed to visit. Ben is upset to see Elena's current state. However, he also realizes that he can't visit that place given his junior position. Through a flashback, we discover that Ben is a former Red Zone resident who grew up in a slum. His real name is Aaron, and Elena is his former girlfriend. In the evening, Ben and Laura go for a romantic dinner. She excitedly shares with him that Spiga has finally permitted them to remove the mandated birth control, allowing them to have a child. Ben is nervous to hear this, but he claims to be happy about the new chapter. The next evening, Ben and a few of his coworkers go to a Red Zone club and end up drinking heavily. The coworkers then take a street drug, but Ben only pretends to. Meanwhile, the poor Red Zoners engage in brutal cage fights, while the rich spectators enjoy the show. Chad soon feels very sick because of the drugs and goes to the restroom. Ben accompanies him to help, but while Chad is vomiting, he secretly takes his blood sample. After that, he rides a motorcycle to a rundown building where he meets a man named Theo. He turns out to be Elena's brother, and Ben informs him that he has located her. The news overjoys Theo, and he asks where they can find her. Ben responds that he will need a promotion to become a top-level executive before he can meet her. Hearing this, Theo is worried about him getting too deep into corporate life and warns him to be careful. The next morning, Ben visits his boss's office to talk about their invention. During this, he secretly activates an anti-riot tech device known as the Whistler. This device produces sound waves that cause nausea to the people around. As a result, Chad begins to feel very sick and goes to the restroom. This man is the least Chadliest Chad in all the land. Ben seizes this opportunity and uses the blood sample he stole to gain access to confidential files on Chad's computer. He then downloads all of them onto a small device before his boss returns. At the end of the day, the employees are lined up to go home and scanned again. However, Chad triggers the alarm. When the device containing confidential files is found in his pocket, he is immediately apprehended and brought before Julian, as taking such information outside of the company is strictly prohibited. It appears that the consequences of his attempted theft will be dire. Later, Elizabeth announces that Chad has been fired for being a traitor, leaving a vacancy in his position. Ben is relieved to hear this because if he gets the promotion, he will be able to finally save Elena. The scene then shifts to 12 years earlier, showing Ben's childhood. It turns out his father was an insurance agent during the severe climate change storms. He confessed his shady dealings to his son before tragically jumping off a roof. Ben then started living in a refugee camp where he met Elena and formed a close bond. However, one day she received sponsorship from her aunt, allowing her to leave the red zone. The two children were separated, but Ben promised to find her someday. As the days passed, he pretended to be blind and wore reverse retinal scanner goggles he made himself. These goggles allowed him to copy other people's eye scans and use them to access machines for extra food. He kept stealing food until he was caught red-handed by a man named Reed. However, instead of punishing him, Reed was impressed by the young boy's talent and offered him a job to earn more money. Returning to the present, Reed has assumed a new identity as Jonathan Hendrick and works as an HR officer at Spiga. He is the only person in the company who knows Ben's true identity. It is also revealed that he was the one who helped Ben take on his fake identity and gain entry into the company. Meanwhile, we see Julian meeting with Elizabeth to discuss Chad's treacherous actions. He suspects that someone else is behind this, as no one is naive enough to steal confidential files and roam freely. Upon hearing this, Elizabeth urges him to investigate everyone in that department thoroughly. Julian mentions that her son-in-law Ben is also there, but she orders him to do whatever it takes to find out the truth. Afterward, Julian approaches Chad and brutally tortures him to extract the truth. The poor guy sobs and claims that he knows nothing about the device he was caught with. When asked about his recent visit to the Red Zone, Chad admits that Ben persuaded him to go there. Meanwhile, Ben talks with his coworker and asks him to admit that Chad was the one who took them to the Red Zone. The latter immediately agrees, as Chad's departure may improve his chances of promotion. After some investigation, Julian learns from his team that Ben stole the Whistler from the security department. Therefore, he summons him for interrogation and asks why he didn't report it earlier. Ben continues to lie, claiming that taking the device was Chad's idea and that he never questioned his boss. Julian says he will confirm this with Chad, and Ben nervously responds that he doesn't mind. Following this, Julian heads to interrogate the poor guy again, but to his surprise, he discovers that Chad's memories have been completely erased. Per Elizabeth's orders, it turns out that he was seen as a liability because he had a lot of sensitive information about the company. The shareholders were becoming concerned, so Elizabeth was forced to take this drastic action. After this, the case is finally closed, and Chad is dumped in the Red Zone with no memory of his identity. His wife is also homeless, and his children are adopted by a rich family in the Green Zone. The following day, Ben receives a visit from Reed, who shares that an escort at Arcadia was shot and killed while trying to escape. This worries Ben, but Reed clarifies that he has no idea if it was Elena. He also advises Ben to forget about that woman and focus on having children with Laura, but our hero refuses to give up. The scene then cuts to a flashback to 6 years ago, where Ben met Elena again as an adult. She used to work at her family's diner while taking classes to earn her scholarship. Ben confidently approached her and showed her the ring she had gifted him years ago. Elena immediately recognized it, and the two friends embraced each other excitedly. After finishing her shift, Elena went to her class, where she was required to inject a serum into her body and undergo extreme brain stimulation. Unfortunately, the experiment didn't go as planned, and she suffered from a violent seizure. But before any real damage was done, Ben, who had been spying on her, jumped to her rescue. He then asked her not to torture herself in the name of a scholarship. Back in the present, we see a propaganda video created by another major corporation, Inzaghi. The video targets children and encourages them to report anyone who criticizes the corporation. We then see the company's vice president, Diana, watching the same video. She realizes that she doesn't want her child to grow up in such a toxic environment. In the following scene, Diana and Inzaghi's president, Mason, arrive at Spiga for some business negotiations. During this time, Diana has a secret meeting with Elizabeth and discloses Inzaghi's plan to develop a super seed that can grow crops in deserts. This could eliminate all corporate competition and put Spiga in a difficult situation. Diana reveals that she wants to help Spiga with this invention before Inzaghi can finalize it. When Elizabeth asks why she wants to do this, Diana explains that she is pregnant and does not want her child to become an Inzaghi pawn. Upon hearing this, Elizabeth is ready to hire her in her company, but there's one slight problem. Inzaghi has implanted a kill switch in Diana's blood, which will terminate her pregnancy if she tries to flee. Following their meeting, Elizabeth discusses the situation with her staff. Ben mentions that he heard an escort died in Arcadia some days ago. He then proposes using the woman's body to stage Diana's death. Elizabeth likes the idea and immediately gives it the green light. She knows that it's risky, but she just can't let her company be defeated by Inzaghi. Unbeknownst to her, Ben's true motive is to examine the dead woman to check if she is Elena or not. Not long after, the dead escort is brought to the company. To Ben's shock, he discovers that the girl has already undergone plastic surgery to look like Diana. The following day, Diana and Mason return to the company for another business meeting. During the presentation, she suddenly pretends to have a heart attack. Ben rushes in with a defibrillator and tries to revive her, but to no avail. He then suggests that he must take her to the hospital or else she won't make it. Mason is reluctant to let her go and mentions about the kill switch, but when the others urge him to switch it off, he reluctantly complies. Following this, Ben proceeds to take Diana to the hospital, but once they reach the elevator, they replace her with the clone. Now that the switch is complete, Ben gets out of the elevator and sadly informs Mason that Diana has passed away. In the aftermath, Ben is given the dead escort's belongings by a staff member. While rummaging through them, he ends up finding Elena's ring. This devastates Ben and he starts crying like a baby, realizing that she is truly dead. We then see a flashback to when he took Elena to an isolated location for some cathartic scream therapy. After venting their frustrations, they finally mustered the courage to kiss each other. Returning to the present, Ben goes home to Laura and informs her that he is giving up on the promotion. He explains that they are already doing well and that he wants to focus on having a child. Laura is overjoyed to hear this and they embrace each other. Afterward, Ben meets with Theo and breaks the news of Elena's death. He also hands him his sister's ring, which makes him cry. But moments later, Theo's DNA suddenly activates Elena's hidden video message. She is revealed to still be alive, and the dead escort was actually her friend. Elena had given the ring to her, hoping she would pass it to Theo after her escape. She then reveals that her contract will soon expire, and her superiors will erase her memories. Elena apologizes in advance to her brother in case they meet again and she doesn't recognize him. Upon hearing this, the two men are emotional, but they rejoice that at least she's alive.